Cheeseheads. Get on your feet. It's Curd and Long. Hosted by Sparky, Fifer, and Ryan Horvath.
Welcome into another edition of Curd and Long. How are y'all doing? See Sparky Fifer with you. Ryan Horvath off today. So our guy Jacob Westendorf is in, SI.com, Packer Central. Him and Bill Huber do a great job over there. Follow him at Jacob Westendorf. You can follow me at Sparky Radio. Lots to get into today. A piece in the 33rd team website that Ryan Horvath, I'm sure, is jealous that he's not here today to talk about, because I tweeted at Horvath. I said, is this a relative of yours, the anonymous executive that is in this story? So we'll talk about that. We'll do our mock draft Friday. As always, Jacob will do that for us today. First, we'll start off with more recent news. Deguara gone to the Jaguars to go join Savage. I'd like to tell you I think this is a loss. I don't think it's a loss at all. I'm not concerned about it one way or the other. I was never a Deguara fan to begin with. I think they missed on that pick. Your thoughts on Deguara, his time in Green Bay, and how big of a loss it is?
A bit of a bummer, just because he had some nice moments as a rookie. And then remember, his knee exploded on Monday Night Football of that COVID season. So I wonder, he didn't have as much, like, this wasn't a great athlete to begin with.
Right.
So did he lose whatever athleticism he had at that point? I think the part that is more interesting about Deguara leaving is how do they replace him? Matt LaFleur's comments this past week about A.J. Dillon's versatility and maybe being a little more than just a tailback. What does that mean? A lot of people are pointing to maybe that fullback, H-back, a similar-ish role, not quite the same, but that Dorsey Levens played in the 90s for that Super Bowl team, something like that. Or are they going to just roll with Henry Pearson, who had some nice moments when Deguara was out? Or do they draft a guy? You know, I think that a popular name is Ben Sinnott from the Kansas State Wildcats as a player that could fit in like that. It's a supercharged Josiah Deguara kind of thing. It is a position the Packers value. They valued it enough to take that player in the third round, 4 years ago now. So as far as Deguara, the player, nice guy. I've had a chance to talk to him quite a few times. Always came on stuff when we were doing things over at Game On Wisconsin. Good-hearted man as far as the football stuff goes. He's a limited player with limited athletic potential there. It's hard to imagine. And now, not only that, they have Musgrave and Kraft, and I don't know how much use you have for a player like that. So wish him well in Jacksonville with Doug Peterson and Darnell Savage and a team that I picked to go to the Super Bowl last year, and that did not go well. So
no, probably not picking him this year to go to the Super Bowl.
No.
So let's talk about this A.J. Dillon thing, because that's interesting to me. Like, having Dillon in the backfield with Jones was always a thing I always wanted and liked. But you never, to this point, ever saw them line up in the backfield with Dillon in the I formation with Dillon as the lead fullback. You would have thought that would have made sense, especially at the goal line. You know, if he was willing to go that route. He's a big dude and can put people on their back for certain if he wants to. He's playing for little to no money by NFL standards to begin with. You would think that if they brought him back, and even Gutekunst said he's surprised that he's back. He didn't think he was coming back. So if he's back and he's not playing for any amount of money, is he going to be willing to put his body on the line like that now going forward and maybe not carrying the football as much?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I wonder if Dillon, I'd like to be able to speak with him and wonder, like, did you have was your market limited enough to the point where now you're thinking, I have to do some different things to stay in the league? You know, the offer that the Packers have, that's not something that is commonly used, which has been pointed out a bunch. And you would think with him making minimal to no money, like, the Packers can cut him at the end of training camp and have basically no penalty for doing so. So that makes me wonder, are you going to be willing to do more of these things out of necessity? Because I do wonder, like, and I think you might get some more answers after the draft. The Packers, there was that report they liked Emmanuel Wilson, and they'll have a chance to win the running back 2 job. And then the running back news that day was hilarious, because you get that report. Then they signed Josh Jacobs, and it's like, okay, well, they have Jacobs and Jones isn't leaving. Then they cut Aaron Jones. And then, like, a couple days later, I remember I texted the report to Huber. I was like, oh, wow, they brought back Dillon. Like, I did not expect him to be back in Green Bay at all, especially after the way last season ended, where he looked like a limited player. And maybe he's not. Maybe there's more to his game, and they'll try and tap into some of that potential. I don't know if it's that lead blocker stuff. I do think if they take a back or two, and I think they should in this upcoming draft class, do you do you then have the ability to do more of that stuff with Dillon? And one of those things that they used were those 2 running back sets where they killed the Rams on that in 2020. Granted, this was a long time ago, but the number 1 rush defense in the NFL, and they just picked them apart with, it was Dillon and Jones at the time, rookie Dillon and younger Jones, but still, I think they ran for more than 200 yards on that day against that team. So those are things that I think LaFleur would like to do more of. They just haven't had the capability because they haven't had enough backs that have been healthy at the same time with some of that ability.
We've talked about this in other podcasts. I'm assuming you're going to agree. Maybe you won't. As far as that other back that you draft, that they're going to draft, I would assume they draft one in the first 2 days. What type of back do you want now that Jacobs is your lead back and not Aaron Jones?
A good one. That's a cop-out.
Yeah, obviously a good one. Thank you for the analysis. This is why we have Jacob Westendorf on Curd and Long. That's the analysis we all look for.
Yeah, that's a cop-out. I think you got Thunder. I do think some lightning is certainly something that they need in that backfield. So whether that's Jalen Wright, Trey Benson, somebody like that, those are some pretty popular names for some stuff like that early. Jonathan Brooks is somebody to me that's interesting. I take him in like every other mock simulation that I run in because I feel like and I don't even know if this is something you should do, but I do feel like teams do this when they have extra picks in the early portion. I feel like they do things they wouldn't normally do. So for example, the Packers have 2 first-round picks a couple years ago. They take a linebacker, which everybody swears up and down they'll never do, but they did do it. And maybe that was a byproduct of, hey, we have an extra first-round pick, so then we can do something that we might normally do. Turns out they took an older prospect as a defensive tackle, which also wasn't normal. But I do wonder, do they do something like that with Jonathan Brooks and say, maybe he's not ready until, the midway point of camp, or maybe he's not ready at all until after he spent some time on the PUP list or anything like that. But we can afford to do that because we have Josh Jacobs and Dillon, and we like Emmanuel Wilson, and we have this extra pick, so we can get somebody that we like, later in the second round, or maybe that's their second round pick or something like that. But I do think players like that are kind of what you look for, as opposed to your bruisers, like say Braylon Allen, just to use a local name that people recognize.
I don't want Braylon Allen. For me, they literally could be in a position at 41 to take whatever running back they want. I mean, they could be the first team to take a running back at 41. And that goes to what your theory of, because they've got another pick there in the second round. If they think, their safety that they like is still going to be there at the end of the second round, they could sit back and wait and be like, we'll get the safety that we want at the end of the second round. We'll take this running back here. And then that first round pick, if that's a cornerback or whichever way they go there in the first round, they could go that way. Or they might like 3 or 4 running backs and be like, we'll get one in the third round because we have multiple third round picks and address another need. Running back history with this team does not signify that they normally go running backs early. That's not something that they traditionally do. So I think it would be a little bit out of the norm if they did take a running back probably in the second round.
Maybe this regime also is the same one that took A.J. Dillon when they had Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones on expiring contracts, albeit. But the running back situation now, Josh Jacobs' contract is essentially a 1-year deal with 3 team options, and A.J. Dillon is on a 1-year deal. So they don't have a long-term, quote-unquote, answer at running back at the moment. So I wouldn't be completely floored. There's not much that Brian Gutekunst can do these days that would surprise. He took a quarterback when the current quarterback had 3 years left on his contract. So I think anybody who tries to tell you that the Packers will, quote, never do this, I don't think anybody should be speaking in absolutes. And I feel like the general manager has proven you wrong over the last 6 years now. So
that's a great point. Oh my God, you're right on the money on that one. Let's talk about the quarterback position for a second, because Bill Huber, your cohort over there at Packer Central, wrote a piece about the quarterback position and how Goody apparently is open to like taking a quarterback every year, maybe like Ron Wolf used to do back in the day. Now back then they would carry 3 quarterbacks, and you would have Brunell, you would have Aaron Brooks, and all these guys over the course of time. You just drafted a quarterback last year in Clifford, who had his moments in preseason and had a little fan club going on social media that wanted him over Jordan Love to play. So he looked okay. They say he grew within the season as far as during practices and stuff, that they like him. You like the idea of taking a quarterback here in this draft? I mean, they have 100 picks. And if you do like that idea, do you have 1 or 2 guys you have your eye on?
Yeah, that's kind of the Ron Wolf thing, like you mentioned at the jump, and Gutekunst talked about it. When you have 1 million day 3 picks, say this much, right? The 49ers had 2 quarterbacks that they liked when they took Brock Purdy.
True.
And that has turned out okay. Brock Purdy's going to get a contract extension this time next year, whether or not you think he should or not, I guess.
Right.
That's not really the conversation here. The point of the matter is that is the most important position in sports. Name your sport, whatever. There's no more important position than quarterback of a professional football team, because without one, the whole thing falls apart. And you've seen that. We've seen it in Green Bay several times. And, the 2 years Rodgers got hurt, both of those teams that he was on when he broke his collarbone, those were playoff teams. And they didn't make the playoffs because they had to start Brett Hundley, with all due respect to Brett Hundley. Developing a quarterback and then being able to flip him for something else, the Packers have had plenty of fortune with that. Teams don't do that as much these days as they did back in the 90s, because I think most teams like to just kind of pick their own guys at this point. But I just can't explain to you guys how much fun watching Joe Milton in the preseason would be. And for the backup quarterback, I have like 2 requirements. Number 1 is I hope you never play, because if you're the backup quarterback, that means the starting quarterback is the guy I probably want playing. And the guy that they have now is pretty good, so I want him to be playing. And number 2, when you do play, it's the preseason. So just help me make that watchable. Like, that's all I'm really asking, which I appreciated Sean Clifford for. He was able to do that over the last couple of years. So I watched Joe Milton at Michigan, and he is Uncle Rico. He can throw it a quarter mile over the mountains, or whatever the Uncle Rico joke was. The phrase that I'd like to use is from Remember the Titans, when Herman Boone says to Ronnie Bass, you can throw it a mile, but you can't pitch it 3 yards. That's Joe Milton. He can throw it a mile, but he throws it 1 speed, and he's going to break receivers' fingers, but he is so much fun to watch because he's going to air it out for everything like that. And that arm talent alone is worth taking a shot on the 3rd day of the draft, where you have something like that. If he develops and becomes a good backup for you, great. If he becomes something more than that, and some team liked him years from now, they're going to trade you. Say you took him, like the thought process when they took Brett Hundley was they take him in the 5th round. They hope to be able to trade him for like a 3rd round pick a few years later. That'll be kind of the hope with Joe Milton at this point. That's kind of the big one that I like at the back end of that draft. I think they'll probably go, because last year when they took Clifford, the thinking was more experience than it was like upside.
Right.
Because Clifford had played 1 billion games at Penn State. He was there when Joe Paterno was there, for God's sake. I think I'm joking. I don't know. But I think that the thought this year, if they take a quarterback, is going to be more of the upside play of, hey, if this guy never pans out, no big deal. But we kind of have the high floor, low ceiling prospect like Sean Clifford.
What about the aspect that you hear a lot of people go back and forth on, which is, I want my backup quarterbacks to be similar to what my starting quarterback does. We don't want to differentiate styles. We want them to be kind of closer to one another, so I don't have to recreate the offense if my backup quarterback comes in and the whole offense changes. How much do you buy into that?
Actually, I'm kind of on the other side. I
Really?
think that I think if your backup quarterback is coming into the game, then chances are you're going to have to do things differently anyways. So I think you almost want somebody that's, for example, Jordan Love can move a little bit, but he's not, the Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields level athlete that those guys are. So I kind of,
he doesn't look to run as much as those guys either.
No. So I kind of want somebody like that anyways, because I'm going to need to smoke and mirrors this thing a little bit. And I mean, coaches just naturally, they don't do the same stuff when the backup is in the game. They're not running like in a spot where it's 2nd and 1 from the 35 or something like that. They're not calling a play action shot play. They're calling a play to get a first down most of the time. So I think when you have something like that, that's where I think someone like Justin Fields, just for example, is a pretty good backup, because his style is different than some other people. He's a limited passer, but his ability to make plays with his legs and create things on the ground at least helps you. Because when you have a backup quarterback in the game, again, most of the time, you're looking to shorten the game and kind of get out of there and make a couple plays to win here or there. I don't think that if you look for a guy who's the same style, like, Aaron Rodgers, for example, when he was the starter, looking for a guy that's the same style of him, that's really hard. He's 1 of 1. Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, he's 1 of 1. You have to change things anyway. So I think if you're changing something, I'm not saying you need to line up and run triple option, but something a little bit different, I think that's the way you got to go on that.
All right, let's take a quick timeout. Come back on the other side. We're going to talk about this piece by 33rd Team, a great website. They got a lot of qualified individuals that do a lot of great work over there. Our guy Ben Fennell obviously helps out over there too. Love Ben Fennell. And a lot of former GMs, players, all that stuff. So it's a high-end website. But like every other website and newspaper, they always have their anonymous people that they talk to that give them quotes and then it blows up into something. An NFL executive gave them a quote that is blown up, talking about the Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love. We'll talk about that coming up next here on Curd and Long. Downloaded on your Odyssey app, or if you download your favorite podcast app. You can also check us out on the Odyssey Sports YouTube page. Back after this. Hey, it's Sparky Fifer, 1250 AM The Fan. Follow me on Twitter at Sparky Radio. He is Jacob Westendorf. He's here for Ryan Horvath, who is off today. Check him and Bill Hubert's great workout at SI.com and Packer Central. All right, so this piece is from 33rd Team, and an NFC executive says this, quote, "It's a really hard decision because I look at what the Packers did as far as, taking a quarterback, what the Packers did, and that team was just so close to winning a Super Bowl. What I wonder is, had they taken an elite receiver and paired him across from Devontae Adams, would they have won a Super Bowl? Maybe they do. I wonder if there's a part of Brian Gutekunst that wonders, had he taken T. Higgins and now he's a Super Bowl winning GM, does that change things? Or would I rather have Jordan Love right now? Would you give up Jordan Love to have a Super Bowl in 2020, says NFC executive on 33rd Team. When that happened, Ryan Horvath went absolutely bananas. Now, in fairness, we had our draft show that day. Gary Ellerson and Bill Michaels were doing the draft show. They both lost their minds on the radio as far as what are we doing? You come off that year and you're doing this in the first round of Jordan Love. Leroy Butler, earlier that day on the big show with me, it was just me and him. I said, who's the one player you absolutely do not want? The man said Jordan Love. That was the player that he picked. He absolutely did not want. So everybody on our station was up in arms. Ryan Horvath is the only one that maybe hasn't let it go necessarily as much. And he brings up T. Higgins almost once a show talking about that. Now, he's come around on Jordan Love. He believes in Jordan Love now after the second half of the season. But that has been an ongoing thing, at least around here in Milwaukee, about that draft pick. Now, I'd much rather have Jordan Love than T. Higgins, without question. I think back then, probably 99% of people rather would have had T. Higgins and a chance to go to a Super Bowl. I would think, Jacob. What was your thoughts when they drafted Jordan Love?
I was not happy. And it wasn't just because they took Jordan, or it wasn't because they didn't take a receiver. So anybody who follows me knows I am not the guy who is always clamoring for them to pick the receiver, to trade for the receiver, to draft.
You're not Jacob Morley.
I am not Jacob Morley. No, I am not Jacob Morley. That's the other one. I am of the belief that my thought on it is pick a player that I think is going to be a good one. My issue was I did not think Jordan Love was going to be a good player. He's already surpassed my expectations of what I thought he could be as a starter this past season. I didn't care about, because I think a lot of it's funny because the revisionist history of everything, that's how this business works. I understand that too, but everybody pretty much agreed that the Packers were in the NFC title game and that it was smoke and mirrors. Like everybody's like, oh, that team wasn't as good as what their record and final standing said they were. Okay. Quarterback's on his last legs. He looks pretty bad in December. And then that playoff game in San Francisco, he was dreadful until the game was going. The whole team was, not just him. I could understand the thought process behind it, but I just didn't think that was the guy to do it. I remember some of the smoke that time of year was like, if Justin Herbert was going to fall, because people didn't like Justin Herbert. I was like, if he falls, take him. But that's about the only one. Tua's probably not going to fall. Joe Burrow was picked number one. He's certainly not going to fall. Got it down the line. I cannot believe that 4 years later, and Jordan Love is a fringe MVP candidate by the end of last season, that we are still talking about this. And I also cannot believe that people just assume, because like the whole premise of this exercise is absurd on its face, right? Why do we just assume that T. Higgins would have won the Packers a Super Bowl in 2020? You guys,
when they traded up, I thought it was Patrick Queen. That's who I thought it was. I was like, okay, they're trading up to take Patrick Queen, the linebacker. That's who I thought the pick was. T. Higgins wasn't even on my radar when they moved up.
No. And he wasn't on mine at that time either. Maybe if they had stayed put where they were at, but that was it. And okay, so the following year, after they take Jordan Love, Love's rookie season, Marquez Valdes-Scantling had over 100 yards receiving in the NFC Championship game against Tampa Bay. They did not lose that game because they didn't have a second receiver. They lost that game because they couldn't block Tampa's front and because the offense couldn't figure out a way to get down the field and score.
Didn't have Bakhtiari either. That killed him.
Bakhtiari not playing certainly did not help. Elton Jenkins was trying to, kind of make do there. Rick Wagner, I still remember watching him drag his leg off the field.
I forgot
because he
about
couldn't
him.
move anymore. Like
Yep.
their offensive line was in shambles by that point of the season. They couldn't do that. The following year, Alan Lazard is the one who's the open receiver on every snapshot that everyone takes to that San Francisco game. If not for a special teams disaster and the quarterback who has played victim for the last 4 years, playing piss poor in a home game against a team that, he always said was going to be sorry that they didn't draft him, couldn't play well enough. Jordan Love, I'll say this. This conversation would have made sense to me if Jordan Love from the first half was the player who finished the season. But he looks like a franchise quarterback. They're going to pay him a boatload of money. And again, no guarantee that T. Higgins wins the Packers a Super Bowl in 2020 and 2021. In my opinion, those two teams, the 2020 team and the 2021 team, were the best team in the NFL each of those seasons. Sometimes the best team doesn't win a Super Bowl. I have a 4-year-old daughter. Her favorite movie is Frozen, and I think we all need to take some advice from Elsa and let it go.
Oh, you wrapped that up beautifully. The other thing I've seen from people on social media is that are anti this T. Higgins stance is, let's say they do draft T. Higgins. There's still no guarantee 12 is going to throw him the football. I mean, he was so locked in on Devontae Adams at that point, Jacob. There's still no guarantee. He may not have developed like he did with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, because those were all young guys, kind of like Jordan Love and his young crew here. He never would have maybe been given that same opportunity by 12.
Yeah, that's the other, playing with Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. I don't want that to get lost in this conversation because I feel like everything that Packer fans and media and all that stuff that we've done since he left is kind of being like, well, we've only talked about the downsides of having Aaron Rodgers. It's having Aaron is like having LeBron. And there's downsides that come to having with a player like that because they're so much smarter and so much more powerful and all that stuff than everybody else. But you're right that Aaron Rodgers' way of playing, and he wants to play and win his way of playing. What's the guarantee? Everybody last year was pointing he won't throw to Christian Watson. He won't throw to Romeo Doubs. He's only throwing to Lazard and Robert Tonyan and the guys that were on the team a year ago. Okay, so why do we just assume that Rodgers is going to replace Alan Lazard and plug in T. Higgins or Odell Beckham or name your receiver that we've plugged into that spot on that dig route against San Francisco? Again, there's nobody within a large area of field of Alan Lazard on that play. And Rodgers loaded up and threw it to Devontae Adams, which felt like something he made his mind up pre-snap that that's what was going to happen.
For sure.
And every quarterback does that, not just 12. But what makes us think that Rodgers isn't going to do the same exact thing if the back of that man's jersey says Higgins instead of Lazard or Beckham Jr. instead
and he has no track record. This isn't T. Higgins after he's been successful in Cincinnati coming in. Then Rodgers would have definitely have thrown him the ball. But that's a rookie you're talking about that has no track record in the NFL at all. And Rodgers, as soon as Higgins runs a wrong route or isn't where he's supposed to be or drops a ball, it's over. It's all done. He's going back to his old guys, and you can sit there and develop for a couple of years.
And I'll say this. I used to be the one who rolled my eyes whenever I heard the whole, oh, he doesn't trust him, so he won't throw him the ball or he puts him in timeout thing. I have on very, very, very good authority now that is a real thing.
Yep.
And if you guys just look at some of the people I've worked with in the past that maybe could help you figure some of that stuff out. But trust me when I say it's good authority. That was a real thing.
Yep, no doubt about it. Absolutely. And it'll be the real thing in New York with the Jets if he can stay on the field. All right, let's take a quick time out, come back. It's Mock Draft Friday, baby. Always look forward to it. Me and Ryan Horvat always do it. No Ryan today. Jacob Westendorf from SI.com and Packer Central will make the picks today. We'll do 3 rounds, real nice and simple. And he does a bunch of great mock drafts as well that you should check out too over at SI.com and Packer Central. Back after this, Kurt and Long, download on your Odyssey app or you download your favorite podcast app. Check us out on the Odyssey Sports YouTube page. Hey, it's Sparky Fifer, 1250 AM The Fan. Follow me on Twitter at Sparky Radio. Jacob Westendorf in for Ryan Horvat. You can follow him at Jacob Westendorf. Check him out at SI.com and Packer Central. Him and Bill Huber do a great job over there covering the Green Bay Packers. A Mock Draft Friday. Let's get to it. 3 rounds we do. I normally use Pro Football Network. I'm not sure which way Jacob likes to go on that one. Jacob, what are we using today?
I went PFF. That's the
Okay.
I used Pro Football Network the other day, and I didn't think it was realistic. So I guess who am I to say whether or not something was
We'll find out on
realistic or not,
draft
but-
day which one was more realistic, I guess.
Right. So we're going to do a little comparing and contrasting. So my article that came out on Wednesday, I called it the obvious pick. So something I do when I do mock drafts, I don't want to just do like what I would do in that situation. I like to like, here's something that could happen. Here are things they could do. So I haven't taken Cooper DeJean from Iowa by design.
I have no interest. I have no interest in that dude. None.
Oh, I do, but I don't want.
You think he's Jason Sehorn the second for the second time in 30 years? That he's going to be that guy? I mean, there's the odds of that are astronomical that he could actually play at a Pro Bowl level. With all due respect, now if he's going to be a safety, okay, maybe I guess
that's where I have him. Safety.
I mean,
that.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I would be doing that, but I don't want to just make the obvious selection every single, or like the one that if you Google Packers mock draft and pull up 10 of them, 8 of them have them picking Cooper DeJean. So I tried to avoid that at least sometimes. And then this time I emailed Bill and I literally said, I finally caved and just took Cooper DeJean on that. So no trades. We'll keep all the original picks. So for those of you keep it score at home, 25, 41, 58, 88, and 91. And rolling through here to the end of the first round. So my picks here, and Sparky, I'll take some input from you as well. We can kind of do this Brian Gutekunst and Milt Hendrickson style. So Johnny Newton, the defensive lineman from Illinois, is on the board. Graham Barton, the offensive lineman from Duke, is on the board. Kool-Aid McKinstry from Alabama is a popular name. And for kicks and grins, one more guy, we'll say Peyton Wilson, the linebacker from North Carolina State, or Tyler Nubin, the safety from Minnesota. So my pick here, if it falls this way, is Graham Barton.
That's who I would have said.
Okay, I think the Packers' offensive line is not far and away, but I think it's their biggest need. Combining that with the safety class not being very good, which is why I liked, like in my article for Wednesday, I liked the DeJean pick and pairing him with Xavier McKinney that way. But that's not an option in this particular case. Tyler Nubin, not the greatest athletic testing in the world. His film, I think, is okay. But Graham Barton, to me, you can keep him at tackle. You can stick him at guard and have him be the starter. I don't know what you guys have said here, but what are your thoughts on, like, I feel like Sean Ryan has just been, like, anointed a starter for reasons I'm not 100% sure.
No, I don't think he played all that great. First of all, let me start by saying that rotation crap that they were doing with that coaching staff was one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. And by the end of the year, it's like, oh, LaFleur's a genius for doing that. Man, get out of here. There is no way. The only reason he did that was because he couldn't get anybody to play well enough. So he's like, okay, fine. Let's raise the level of competition and see if that gets anybody to get going. It got Runyon going. So it worked from that perspective. Obviously, it started to work. The left tackle thing, Rasheed Walker finally started to get better because he was awful in the beginning of the year. And that worked out. I'm not convinced he's the left tackle of the future. And I don't think LaFleur is either by listening to him. And at right guard, I definitely don't think it's Ryan. So for me, if I'm drafting Barton, and that would be my pick, he'd slide right into right guard and we're done. The other thing I've brought up, and it's not popular, and I'm okay with that, is I would consider taking a tackle that's super athletic that you think can play right tackle, and Tom slides into right guard, and I got 2 good-sized dudes over there on the right side that I can now run behind going forward. Mark Tauscher was a very good offensive tackle. I always said back then, because I'm old, that I thought Mark Tauscher could have been an all-pro guard. Had they just put him at guard and been done with it, he could have been unbelievable. But he was really good at tackle, so they left him. I kind of feel like we're getting in the same thing with Zach Tom here, who was really good against the pass last year at right tackle, no question, no argument whatsoever. But because he's good, they don't want to move him and then risk putting somebody in there that might not be as good as him. So they're just going to say to hell with it and just leave him at right tackle. And he played left tackle in college too. That was brought up in one of these podcasts too that we've done of, who's to say they don't move him back over to the left side and let him play left tackle and draft a right tackle. So there's lots of options.
Yeah, I'm not against that idea either of him being the left tackle if they think that if they can get a first-round pick that they think is moving that way. I'm not against drafting a tackle either. Maybe that means Graham Barton, with the pick that we're making here, is Barton is the guy who plays right tackle and Rasheed Walker's your swing. That is something the Packers have also shown to value. They paid $4.5 million last year for a swing tackle in Yosh Nijman, and it didn't end up working out. Obviously, he didn't have that great of a season, but being able, that's just, to me, that says that's something they value, is having depth at tackle. And as you guys have seen, once I feel like it's a position the Packers fan base kind of takes for granted because we've been pretty fortunate over the last 20 years or so, because it basically went right from Clifton to Bakhtiari. A little bit of a respite there with Marshall Newhouse in the middle there, but otherwise it's been those two guys, and they've been pretty good. I feel like Rasheed Walker is good, not great. And you brought up a good point. He was rotating with Yosh Nijman, a guy nobody wanted the Packers to bring back as late as December 17th against Tampa Bay. So
Crazy.
I don't think that Walker's bad. I'm not trying to say that, but I do think the idea again that he's the left tackle and that's the guy. Don't need to draft a lineman in the first round. I feel like that's misguided. And if Barton's only a guard, if you came here to listen to me talk about positional value and you can't take a guard in the first round, I will tell you you're in the wrong spot because I don't care. So that's kind of my take there. Graham Barton is my pick there then at 25. So we'll go to 41 now. Tyler Nubin's still available. So is Peyton Wilson. Mikey Sainer still. Kamari Lassiter. Ennis Rakestraw. Michael Penix. No, I'm just kidding. Keon Coleman.
You imagine this fan base that they took a quarterback at the second round.
Oh my God. Yeah. So that's kind of where Zach Frazier's a center. Probably don't need to. Well, I shouldn't say we don't need to do that, but probably wouldn't do that just with the selection of Barton early. So,
what about edge rushers? Are there any edge rushers there?
Chris Braswell is available as a pass rusher, and that's kind of Adisa Isaac from Penn State. So not Chop Robinson, but the other one. Marshawn Nealand is available as well for something like that. So
based on that, I'm out. I'll move back. I think one time. I'm sitting there in the second round, and those are my options. I think I might be willing to listen to somebody trying to trade up. But my deal is, if you haven't heard it on Curtin Long before, is when I move back, I don't want extra picks this year. I want a pick next year. So if I move back and you're going to give me an additional 3 this year, I'll take it for 2025. I'm good, and I'll swap picks and we'll move back. For me, I would love to get into a position as an organization of going into every draft with an extra second or an extra third or whatever the case may be. The first 2 days of the draft, that's where I like to have every extra picks every year moving forward.
And the Packers have done that over the last couple of between the Aaron Rodgers trade and the Devontae Adams trade. They've been able to do that. So unfortunately, no trades in this exercise. So me personally, and before you guys give this to me, yes, he's too small. It's not something they've typically done. But I am the general manager today. So I am looking at Mike Sainer still as the nickel corner safety of the future, former wide receiver. So his ball skills are there and he's a playmaker. He would have been Iowa's third leading receiver last season just on his own interception yardage. And plus, since I'm in charge, I'm a Michigan guy. I'll take the homer pick. So pick 41 is Mike Sainer still. And you could go ahead and tell me they'll never pick him, and that's fine, and maybe they won't. Let's go to 58.
They definitely need a corner, though. Like, there's no debate about needing a corner. Whoever that is, whether it's him or somebody else, or if it's Kool-Aid, they have to get a corner somewhere here in the first 2 days.
Yeah, and inside or out. I think that you could stand to add some competition for Keyshawn Nixon as the nickel guy, and you could stand to add competition. Stokes, Valentine, the non-Jair Alexander cornerbacks for something like that. So we're on to pick 58 here in the second round. So I have Marshawn Nealand. I have Jonathan Brooks, the running back from Texas, available. Chris Jenkins, the defensive tackle from Michigan. And then Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker from – yeah, I think that's got to be, at this point, the answer to, just because Cooper, he's athletic. There's some questions about the fit with him and Quay Walker, but the Packers have kind of proven in the past that doesn't matter too much to them. And I think with their emphasis on adding these guys with backgrounds of linebackers, they're going to try and teach guys how to do that. So we're going to roll with Edgerrin Cooper on, I hit the wrong button. So I hope you don't want a picture of this afterwards because I picked somebody else, but Edgerrin Cooper is the pick officially on that board. So we're going to roll to pick number 88. So for those of you keeping track at home right now, we have Graham Barton, we have Mike Sainer still, and we have Edgerrin Cooper as our first 3 picks. We're on our first pick in the third round here. There's Gabriel Murphy, the edge from UCLA. Patrick Paul, the tackle from Houston. He's massive. Renardo Green, which is the corner from Florida State. There's Dominic Puny, the tackle from Kansas, and Kalen Bullock, the safety from USC. And Dadrian Taylor Demerson, that's another guy, a safety from SC as well. So any of those names tickle your fancy.
What about did Cole Bishop go already?
Let me search him because these boards all look. No, he didn't. So that is certainly a possibility.
I
So
think that would be my pick. That would be my guy if I was drafting. But it's your draft. You're the general manager. You do what you seem fit.
yeah, but you know what? I kind of went rogue with the Mike Sainristil pick, so I can give you. We got a pick here and a couple picks too with Cole Bishop. So
Right.
I'll give you Bishop here at 88, and then we'll go to 91, our last pick here. So Cole Bishop, we added to our safety spot, and then here is where I think I am looking for a playmaker on the offensive side of the ball. So Trey Benson and Jalen Wright are both available. Do you have a preference between one or the other? We haven't taken it back at this point. I feel like we've given every bit of love on that side.
So I will tell you, I know my guy's not going to be taken because of the stupid RAS score that everybody's infatuated with in Green Bay. I love Bucky Irving, and I know they're not going to take him. So I know I'm not going to get him. So now you're giving me these two. I like Jalen Wright. That's who I would go with.
Yeah, I'll go with Jalen Wright as well. He's a tackle breaking machine. He's that speed guy that you want at the back end of your guys' running back room here. And then, the ability to potentially be somebody that is their long-term solution there. So at the end of it, Graham Barton, Mike Sainristil, Cole Bishop, and who did we just take? Jalen Wright. Sorry. Oh my gosh, totally drew a blank.
Do you think he actually gets to the third round? I don't. I think because of how he ran, I think he's going to end up in the second round. I can't imagine he falls to the third.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's not likely that he ends up getting there, but I mean, who am I to argue with simulations as they happen? A lot of people didn't think Darnell Washington was going to be available past like pick 40 last year, and he almost went on the third day of the draft. So there's a bunch of stuff that we don't know. Outside of like Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison, I don't think we can do a whole lot of they won't be there kind of stuff.
No doubt.
There's obviously examples, of stuff like people falling and stuff like that. So I'm interested to see how it goes, but exciting for that draft. So for comparison's sake, I took Zach Frazier, Kieran Amagaji, the offensive tackle from Yale, Trey Benson, and Jerry Jones at those slots in the second and third round for Wednesday. So you guys decide which one you like better.
I like this one. I like this one a lot. I like Cooper. I like taking a guard there in the first round, and he has the ability to play tackle. We all know that's what the Packers want. You have to be able to play like 4 of the 5 positions if they're going to draft you on the offensive line. So that makes sense. I obviously like the Bishop pick. I like Jalen Wright. Your corner Michigan guy, we'll see how that all plays out one way or the other. Because I'm one of those guys. I get worried about size. I've seen too many short guys not work out with the Packers. So I get a little bit concerned with size. But other than that, I'm good. I like it. Do you like doing mock drafts? Do you get down with it, or is it for the job so I do it?
No, I like it. I always, like I said, I like to do different scenarios. This happens, so what happens if this happens? I think it gets monotonous if you do what some people do, and people are welcome to do whatever they want to do. But if you pick the same 4 or 5 people in every mock, then it's like, okay. So what I like to do at the end of my mocks for Wednesday is I'll say, this is what worked and this is what didn't. So for example, we'll get, like in this draft, we were able to get Edgerrin Cooper at 58. If we didn't, then there weren't any linebackers really worth considering. So what I did on Wednesday was I wasn't able to get a linebacker early. So I took 3 of them on day 3 and was like, that's probably not the way Brian Gutekunst wants to approach it, but that is what happened in this particular case. And sometimes, if there's anything we've learned, I think about Gutekunst is he won't force a pick just because they quote unquote need that player. Like last year they needed a safety and the only player they took was Anthony Johnson, which was at the end of the 7th round. So they didn't force a pick if they didn't like the player. So I'm interested to see how that goes.
Have you done a mock draft where they move back up into the first round and end up with 2 first-round picks by moving a 2 and a 3 or whatever and sliding back up at the end of round 1 with 2 first-round picks?
I haven't done one of those. I did one recently where I traded up to 19 and took Olu Fashanu from Penn State. So he was sitting there and I was just like, again, another thing I don't think is going to happen, but it's interesting. And if it does, I feel like the Packers would be trying to find their way back up the board.
That would be cool.
But you just gave me an idea, so I'm going to try and pick at 25 and 32 next week.
Yeah, just get back up in the first round. I'm wondering how far up you can get giving up a second and a third. Like if you give up 41 and then your first pick in the third round, I wonder how far up the board you can get before they start saying no to you in those mock draft simulators. Just interesting. Jacob Westendorf, follow him on Twitter at Jacob Westendorf. Check him out at SI.com and Packer Central. Always a pleasure having him on Curd and Long. Download it on your Odyssey app or wherever you download your favorite podcast at. Check us out on the Odyssey Sports YouTube page. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good one. Toodles.